Nintendo publishes the popular video game series. Pokémon games are at the top of the list of the world's most popular video games. Pocket Monsters Red and Green, the original Pokémon game, was launched in 1996 on a black and white Game Boy. It was a huge success, prompting the development of follow-up games by what is today regarded as one of the top media franchises in the world. Pokémon Legends Arceus, the most recent Pokémon game, was released on Nintendo Switch in January 2022. Pokémon is one of the world's most popular media properties, with multiple Pokémon-themed movies, anime programs, and goods such as toys and card games. Pokémon Go, its spin-off game, has reached 1 billion downloads. Pokémon is the third best-selling video game, after only Nintendo's Super Mario and Tetris. This year, the video game sold over 400 million units on mobile and home consoles worldwide. Its tremendously outstanding sales numbers compel anybody who is unfamiliar with the game to explore Pokémon games and perhaps attempt a game or two to see what all the fuss is about. Some Pokémon games have performed better than others, and among the franchise's 122 entries, here are 10 of the best-selling games of all time. 10. Pokémon Yellow, Special Pikachu Edition, 14.6 million units. Pokémon Yellow debuted in 1998. It is a superior version of Pokémon Red and Blue for Game Boy from the first generation of the game series. The game was released at the same time as Pokémon, the first movie. Volkswagen and Nintendo partnered to design a yellow Volkswagen New Beetle automobile inspired by Pikachu. Pikachu is the sole accessible Pokémon in the video game at the start. Pikachu's speech and demeanor are distinct from those of other Pokémon. Pokémon Yellow has somewhat better visuals than its predecessors, despite being the final release of the first generation Game Boy releases. Pokémon Yellow is ranked 42nd among the top 100 video games of all time by IGN. It was a huge hit following its debut, selling over 1 million copies in Japan the first year and over 1 million copies in the United States in the first 10 days. In 1998, it was the best-selling portable game. Pokémon sold 2 million units in Europe during its European debut in June 2000. Pokémon Yellow has sold over 14.6 million units since its release. 9. Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, 14.7 million units. Pokémon Brilliant and Shining Pearl, which were published in 2021, are remakes of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, which were introduced in 2006. Following the game's release, there were many conflicting reviews, with some people praising the game and others criticizing various alterations made to the game and its visual design. Some reviews considered the game's visuals were inferior to those of the previous two Pokémon remakes. Despite the criticism, Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are expected to sell significantly more than expected. Soon, the game will be at the top of the list of the most popular Pokémon games. It sold 6 million units in the first week and 14.7 million units in the first 6 months of availability, taking the place of the popular Pokémon Yellow, which has been on the market for more than 20 years. Fans of the game's visuals said that its new appearance was fantastic since it maintained true to the previous game's 2D aesthetic while still being upgraded. 8. Pokémon Black and White, 15.6 million units. Pokémon Black and White were the first titles in the Pokémon video game series' 5th generation. The games included 156 new Pokémon as well as additional features like as a seasonal cycle, triple fights, fully animated Pokémon sprites, and rotation bouts. Unlike earlier Pokémon game settings, which were based on actual locations in Japan, the Unova area was modeled on New York City. Unova, like any other metropolis, has skyscrapers, large bridges, an airport, and even a harbor. Pokémon Black and White received overwhelmingly good reviews, with many game critics applauding the game's gameplay innovations. The games, like their predecessors, have a linear plot. 1.8 million pre-orders have already been placed in Japan before to the game's release. Pokémon Black and White sold over 2.6 million units in Japan in the first 2 days, and over 1.8 million units in the United States on the first day. They sold 2.4 million copies in 9 months. Pokémon Black and White has sold over 11.5 million units globally by April 2011. The games have already sold over 15.65 million units globally. 7. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, 16.2 million units. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, the third iteration of the video game series, were released in 2002. The games were co-published by the Pokémon Company and Nintendo. The game was initially released in Japan, and then the rest of the globe got their hands on it in 2003. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire's gameplay was nearly identical to that of its predecessors. The player's primary goal is to capture every Pokémon and crash the Elite Four. The player must battle and defeat a criminal group attempting to dominate the land. Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire got overwhelmingly good reviews, despite some criticism of the game's aesthetics. The popularity of the Pokémon games had declined, reducing sales, in contrast to the prior titles, which fared exceedingly well. In the first 4 days after its debut in Japan, Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire sold 1.2 million copies. In the first 8 weeks, the game sold 1.5 million units in the United States. Over 16.2 million units have been sold globally, with the Game Boy Advance titles selling the most copies. 6. Pokémon Sun and Moon, 16.2 million copies. In 2016, Pokémon Sun and Moon were released. They were released for the Nintendo 3DS by Nintendo and the Pokémon Company, ushering in the 7th generation of the video game franchise. The game included 81 new Pokémon and features, like his new moves, alien animals, updated gameplay, and significantly enhanced visuals. Pokémon Sun and Moon go across the Alola area with a Pokémon trainer. The goals of the game are to complete the Island Challenge, smash Team Skull and the Ether Foundation, and battle other Pokémon trainers. The reviews for Pokémon Sun and Moon were mostly positive, with the exception of a few critics who were disappointed by the lack of material beyond the narrative shared by prior Pokémon games. So far, Pokémon Sun and Moon have sold 16.2 million units, which is somewhat fewer than prior Nintendo 3DS titles. They finished third in sales, trailing only Mario Kart 7 and Pokémon X and Y. In the 2016 DICE Awards, the games were named Portable Game of the Year, and they won again in the 2017 Golden Joystick Awards. 5. Pokémon X and Y, 16.6 million units. Pokémon X and Y debuted in 2013. They were the first of the 6th generation video game series to be released on the Nintendo 3DS. They were published simultaneously all around the world, making them Nintendo's first game to do so. The narrative is similar to that of earlier Pokémon games. The adventure of a Pokémon trainer and his companions who train other Pokémon is followed by the players. The X and Y games take place in the Kalos regions, which are modeled in France. The aim is to destroy Team Flare while also attempting to challenge Diantha, the Kalos area Pokémon League champion. The game garnered generally good reviews, with several critics praising the game creator's gameplay innovations. Pokémon X and Y were a huge success, especially given they were released on the Nintendo 3DS. Within the first weekend of its release, the game sold over 4 million copies worldwide. According to Bulbapedia, the game sold 11.6 million copies in the first 3 months, making them the best-selling Pokémon releases on the Nintendo 3DS as of March 2022. Pokémon X and Y have currently sold over 16.5 million copies globally. 4. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, 17.6 million units. Pokémon Diamond and Pokémon Pearl were the first games of the 4th generation of the video game franchise, published in 2006. They were initially launched in Japan in 2006, and then worldwide the following year. The narrative of the game, like with all prior games, is basically the same, with players following the life of a Pokémon trainer as they train and battle other Pokémon. In this game, the opposition is Team Galactic, a criminal organization that the player must vanquish. It was the first game that allowed users to link their Nintendo to the internet and play online. It also included 107 new Pokémon and other adjustments to the combat system. Pokémon Diamond and Pearl also had a multiplayer mode in which trainers may compete against one another. The reviews for Diamond and Pearl were quite positive, with critics and gamers praising the Wi-Fi enabled games and improved graphics. According to Tom's Guide, Pokémon Diamond and Pearl were more successful than other Game Boy Advance games previously published. The games have sold over 17.6 million units globally. They outsold their immediate predecessors, Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, by selling 2 million more units. At the 2007 G4 Awards, the game was named the best portable game. The games were nominated for the Children's Kids Vote Award by the British Academy of Film in 2008. 3. Pokémon Gold and Silver, 23.7 million units. In 1999, Pokémon Gold and Pokémon Silver were released. They were the first Pokémon games in the video game franchise 2nd generation. They brought 100 new Pokémon to the game universe, and despite the fact that they are 2 separate games, they have the same narrative, but players must trade between the 2 games to complete the game's Pokédex. The narrative of Pokémon Gold and Silver is similar to that of earlier Pokémon games, with players following a Pokémon trainer through the game, beating the Elite Four, and finishing the game by collecting more Pokémon. The critically praised games garnered overwhelmingly great reviews and are considered to be among the finest in the video game series. Their enormous success demonstrates their appeal. According to Statista, over 23 million copies of the games have been sold globally. 3 weeks before their release, the games garnered over 1 million pre-orders in the United States. 2. Pokémon Sword and Shield, 24.5 million units. In 2019, Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield were launched. The 8th Pokémon game installments were introduced in the newer games. They were also the second Pokémon game published on a home video game system after Pokémon, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. The game follows a Pokémon trainer as he fights to become the Pokémon champion. Pokémon Sword and Shield are located in the Galar area, which is modeled by the United Kingdom. In the game, the player's aim is to dethrone the league champion, Leon, and destroy the criminal organization known as Team Yell. When the business opted not to include all pre-existing Pokémon in the game, there was a lot of outrage, but it also got a lot of favorable feedback. Fans really liked the game's new features, which included enhanced visuals and a straightforward UI. It is widely known due to its immense success and sales. Pokémon Sword and Shield sold over 2 million units in the first weekend in the United States. The game sold over 6 million units globally in their first week. Over 24.5 million pieces have already been sold globally. 1. Pokémon Red, Green, and Blue, 31 million units sold. This is where the Pokémon obsession began. Pokémon Red and Blue, the first titles in the Pokémon video game series, were published in 1996. They were first launched in Japan in 1996 as Pocket Monsters Red, Pocket Monsters Green, and Pocket Monsters Blue. The games were eventually re-released in the rest of the globe as Pokémon Red and Pokémon Blue, combining the red, green, and blue games. The premise is the same as in all other Pokémon games. The player follows the Pokémon trainer on their journey to become Indigo League champion by fighting the Elite Four and other Pokémon. Critics have consistently placed Pokémon Red, Green, and Blue as among the finest video games ever created. They have been named among the best games on IGN. It was also the start of the multi-billion-dollar Pokémon series. By 1999, it had become the best-selling video game in the United States, selling over 6 million units that year. The game sold more than 31 million sales worldwide by 2022, making them the best-selling titles in the Pokémon video game franchise.